The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Russiniello. I'm a senior consultant with SWK, and today we're going to be going through a presentation of creating dashboards in Excel. If you notice on my screen, I have an Excel spreadsheet that has several dashboards that we've created using ABC XYZ data. I'm going to show you how we can pull information directly from Excel, from Sage 100 into Excel, and how we can use pivot tables and pivot charts to create what amounts to a dynamic dashboard that we can refresh on a real-time basis. Now, we can certainly use information from Sage Intelligence to create these dashboards. I decided to actually show you guys how to create these dashboards simply using a database query, which means we don't necessarily have to go through Sage Intelligence to create this. We can actually just be right in Excel and pull the information directly from Sage. Now, the information here is a project I worked on last year that pulled store visitors with a client that has many retail locations, and we wanted to see how many visitors were tracking the different stores and what the demographics of those visitors were. So in order to capture that information, we've got to actually track that and post that in Sage. So I'm going to show you how we can capture this type of data in Sage so that we can then push it into Excel. So we're going to open up in Sage, in the ABC company. We have the ability to store what are called non-financial accounts, and these would be accounts in the general ledger that we would be able to create to store this type of demographics. We can store number of employees in our company, the number of widgets we sell. So there's all kinds of information we can actually store in our general ledger so that we can then report on it. And that's done through non-financial accounts. So setting up non-financial accounts, a couple of steps. First, in the GL, under Setup, we're going to go to Account Group Maintenance, and we're going to specify an area of our general ledger, of our chart of accounts, that will be reserved for these non-financial accounts. So I'm going to specify that anything above 995, my main account, is a non-financial account. And under category, you'll notice that they give us one for non-financial, and the only account type is also non-financial. So we now have a grouping, an area of our chart of accounts reserved for these types of accounts. And it's important that we do, because these behave differently in the system. You're not going to see them in your income statement or balance sheet, but they are available for us to use in reports. So we've created an area of our chart of accounts. We can go to main account maintenance, and we can specify all the way at the bottom account number 995 as head count. And you'll notice it's a non-financial account. And now I can go all the way up to account maintenance, and I can simply populate account number 9950000 as head count. Now, if I were using the middle two or last two segments as store number, as location, I can actually post transactions by location. So in this case here, I have headcount as a general account. It looks just like any other account, but since it's in the 995 grouping, it's a non-financial account and it won't interfere with our income statement or balance sheet, but we can still post transactions in there. Now, how do we post transactions in there? We go into the general journal and we create a source journal called NF for non-financial. We give it a number, we go to our lines tab. It knows that it's not a normal posting. The NF source journal is looking for non-financial accounts. I would go ahead and select the account I want to post to, and I'm just simply going to post 10. When I post this transaction, it's going to put 10 into the account 995 for February 2020. So you can kind of see how we can start aggregating these types of statistical data in our general ledger that we can then use for really different types of reports. So creating these non-financial accounts and entries is, the first stop to really building a great dashboard that includes both financial and non-financial information. Now that we have information in our general ledger and we want to get it out, we can use Sage Intelligence to essentially pull that information out. For today's demonstration, I'm just going to go directly into Excel and I'm going to use a database query to pull information from Sage. So in Excel, if I go to the Data tab, and I go to From Other Sources, and I go to Microsoft Query, here are my DSNs, or data sources. The data source to connect to Sage is the SODAM S90. It's going to ask me for my company code and my username and ID. For security purposes, we definitely will want to be sure that users can only extract data that they have access to. That's all done through role maintenance. So at this point, if somebody doesn't have access to go into the AP module, we certainly don't want them creating a database query with access to the AP module. So that's all controlled through role maintenance. But I'm going to go in here. And I now have access to all the tables in Sage. When users begin really building reports using these database queries, initially we tell them, seek us out. Let us kind of guide you to where that information is. There's a lot of information and a lot of tables. So unless you spend the time really understanding where all the data lives in Sage, that could take a while. A quick email to one of our consultants can probably, drive you down the right path in a much quicker route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the GL account table. I'm going to pull in my account and account description, and I'm going to go to my GL detail table. And I'm going to pull everything over. And I'm going to simply accept all the prompts. Let's go ahead and log back in one more time. And what I have done is pull my GL detail into Excel. I love this because this is the same as running a GL detail report. I've got my account number, account description, posting date. I've got comments over here. I've got debits and credits. So everything that you're going to find in a GL detail report is now housed here. What I love about this is if I'm ever researching a transaction, maybe I want to see what happened on 6/6/2020, an erroneous posting in the future. I can simply go in here and just start looking for that date. And now I have all my transactions. And if I happen to know the journal number, I can further filter down, and I essentially have the transactions that make up whatever it is I'm looking for. Now, if I wanted to, I can do a few things here. I can essentially add some formulas, which is, I sometimes like creating a formula called a count, and it takes the debits minus the credits and gives me, one column. Negative amounts will essentially be credits, positive amounts will be debits. What this allows me to do is essentially sum them up and make sure if I ever had an out of balance entry, I would probably know if my trial balance was ever out of balance. I can use this query to look at all of the transactions for a particular day or particular month and quickly find out if they were in balance or not simply with this column. I can do a few more things. I can do month and year, and I can use some nifty Excel formulas to point back to my posting date. And now I have columns that tell me the month of the transaction and the year of the transaction. Okay, so as I start building out dashboards or pivot tables, this certainly becomes useful, much easier to work with than just trying to let Excel crunch all of these posting dates and aggregate them by month and by year. So we're going to look at some of those formulas. Again, the beauty of this is I can now save this as a file on my desktop called GL Detail, and I'm going to close it. And I can come back in here tomorrow without going into Sage. I can open up that spreadsheet, and I can simply go to Data and refresh all, and go ahead and plug in my credentials. And now I have a fairly small data set, so it took about 1 second to retrieve all the records. I think, depending on the size of your data, it may take, 10 seconds, it may take 40 seconds. But it has now gone out to Sage, retrieved all the data, returned it to me, and now I can start researching whatever I need without having to run GL Detail reports. And all of my formulas are intact. They stay with the table, and every time I have new records, they get added to the new table. So these database queries are wonderful. We can use them in GL, we can use them in AP, inventory, and in this case, it's going to become the basis for creating our dashboards. So let's go ahead and close out of the spreadsheet. We're going to go back to our demo dashboard spreadsheet, and I'm going to start by talking about the GL account breakdown, because we mentioned that we first stop in this type of a dashboard dealing with headcount and not necessarily financial information is creating non-financial accounts for the number of customers and the type of customers in our company. So in our chart of accounts that I'm using here, I've got a 4-digit, 2-digit, 3-digit account structure, account number. The first 4 digits will be the store location. The middle 2, I'm not really using for anything. And then the last 3 is going to be the type of customer. So you could see my store locations. This takes place, of course, in Southern California. So I have stores in San Diego, I have stores in Irvine, and then as it relates to the type of customers, the last three digits of my last segment is really I've defined them based on the gender, ethnicity, and age. So as I'm aggregating this type of information outside of Sage, I can upload them through a journal entry on a monthly basis, and then I can report. Now, what I get is a report that, or is a database query that will have all of my GL detail postings, okay, much like we just saw. And I've got my amount here. We noticed how I created a period and year using the same type of formulas that we used earlier. I also used a few more formulas here that I'll just make you aware of. So if I wanted to get demographic and I wanted to isolate it in its own column, what I did was use an Excel formula equals right, point to the account number, and return the rightmost three digits of that account number. So now I have the demographics in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that to find out what the type of customer and what the second type of customer is. So you'll notice I have a column here called type and type 2. And this is another helpful formula that I use quite often in Excel. It's a VLOOKUP. A VLOOKUP says, go ahead and look for this number on a different table or list and return either the next column over or the second to next column over. So if I wanted to find out what 901 is, I can say equals VLOOKUP. I can point to this cell, comma. I can then say go out to the demographics tab and look in columns E and F and return the second column in that selection. And then true or false simply means either look for the exact name or not. When I do that, essentially it says 901 is gender, 906 is ethnic. When I go to the next column, I do the exact same thing, only I point to columns E and G, and I'm looking for the third column in that table or selection. So in this case, it's looking for 901, and it's going to the third column, and it's returning male. Once I have one formula in here with Excel, it's just a click of the button, and it goes and it copies that over all the way to the bottom. And now I have columns that I can use for my pivot tables and pivot charts that will give me the gender and the male accordingly. So now I have gender male for my demographics. I have for January 2015, we had 18 customers come into our store. And I've got that information for every type of demographic and every store for every month. So again, we've created non-financial accounts. We've created a database query. Now that we have this database query in place, we can now use this information to create pivot tables and pivot charts. So pivot tables. I have a tab here called pivot tables. And I've already predefined several pivot tables. I have number of visitors per month, by store. I have total visitors by month, by year. I have the annual comparison of the demographics, so I can compare the type of customers I have by month, by year. I also have the top 5 stores by the number of customers they have, and a couple more. So I actually have a tab that has all of these pivot tables defined. Again, the goal is when we create our dashboard, we create this once, and then all we have to do on a monthly basis is simply refresh it. But let's see how we created one of these pivot tables. If you haven't created a pivot table before, what we do is we go to the Data tab, and we simply select any cell in our table, and we go to Insert Pivot Table. It grabs the whole table, and I can put it in a new spreadsheet. In this case, I'm going to put it in an existing spreadsheet so we can kind of see what it looks like compared to our other data. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in our Pivot Tables tab. From there, I hit OK, and now I have a wizard, a helpful guide that's going to tell me what do I want to show in this pivot table. So I'm going to select the cost center description or the store number under filters. I'm going to select the period for rows. I'm going to select the year for columns. And I'm going to select the amount under value. So you can kind of see where it helps that we have amount in one column and not debit and credit, because that way we can simply use the amount column in our selection. Filter, I have all of the stores as a filter here. If I leave it at all, this is how many visitors attended all of our stores per month per year. If I were to filter this by store, let's say I select Rancho Santa Margarita, I now have the number of visitors that attended our store by month by year, and you'll notice that this pivot table looks pretty close to this pivot table because we just created this in much the same way I created the first one. And if I go ahead and I show my field list and I pull out my store number, then what I'm left with is another pivot table that essentially gives me the number of store visitors to all of my stores by month and by year. So quickly, I have 2 pivot tables that show number of visitors by location and number of visitors for all of my locations. And I've done the same kind of pivot table for demographics. Essentially, what pivot tables allow you to do is slice and dice your information to see it differently. It's similar to what we can do with crystal reports, just in Excel. One thing I'm going to mention here, this is kind of a neat little variation that we can add to our pivot tables, and that's we want to find the top 5 stores. So once my pivot table is selected, what it would normally do is show me all of my stores from top to bottom, and I have about maybe 20 of them in our territory. What I can do is go to my row labels, go to value filter, go to top 10, and say only show me the top 5 items or stores by their amount. And I can always sort these ascending or descending if I wanted to, but I at least now have the top 5. This is helpful because as we build our dashboards and we want to get the top 5 or top 10 stores or items or anything, we would have to have the filter in place in our pivot table to then properly display in our pivot chart. So any type of these filters can be done with any of our pivot tables. So filtering is certainly a neat capability once you start playing with pivot tables. Pivot charts. This is where it starts getting fun. I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm going to call this New Chart. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of these, and we're going to try to replicate what we've created here. So I'm going to go to my pivot tables, and I'm going to go to the first one, and I'm going to go and we're going to create a pivot chart. Let me close this up. Pivot chart is in the Insert tab under Pivot Chart. And once I click on it, I have several selections. I'm going to keep it as a column chart, and I'm going to hit OK. It does stick it in the tab you're working, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and cut it, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay, now I'm also going to go ahead and we're going to start maybe around here. And I'll tell you, this is the most difficult part, I would say, of building these dashboards is really just formatting it. I think once you get used to pulling data and working with it, making it pretty, of course, is going to be the time-consuming part. So we've got one of the charts up here. I'm actually at this point going to probably put in a title for this. So let's go here. Let's go ahead and put it to Y. I'm going to call this my ABC XYZ Retail Customers Dashboard. And I can go ahead and maybe make it larger. And I can center it. And I can go ahead and color it. And so I have a, maybe a title that stands out a bit. I'm going to start creating my other dashboards. So let's go to the second one. That's going to be, let's go to top 5 stores. And I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to insert a pivot chart. This time, I am going to change it to a pie chart. I'm looking at the top 5 customers, and I want to kind of see how they look in a pie chart. So I'm going to select the pie. Of course, it sticks it in here. I'm going to go ahead and cut it. We're going to put it in our new charts. I'm going to paste it here. And let's go ahead and stretch it out. Let's kind of do something like this. So we're getting there. And I'll go ahead and do a couple more. We're going to go to the annual demographics. Let's go ahead and insert our pivot chart. This one is going to be a column chart again. Of course, once you do one of these, you'll kind of get the hang of it. In this case, let's go here. And finally, let's pull one more. Let's pull this one here. Let's go ahead and insert this. This one's going to be another pie chart. I'll make it, got a lot of breakdown, a lot of variability. And we're going to cut this guy and put it here. And let's stretch him out. Okay, so we've got four charts here, pivot charts, fully dynamic. As we refresh our data, this will get refreshed accordingly. We're going to add one other powerful feature here that's called the slicer. It would be great if your user was able to actually say, you know what, this is great, but I want to dynamically see how many visitors hit our stores by by store. We can do that through what's called a slicer. So I can highlight my my pivot chart. I can go into insert and insert a slicer. You will need to know what it is you're looking for. I'm actually going to use my store number and year as slicers. I'm going to put one up here. I'm going to put one down here. And now as I change things, it becomes a dynamic table, a dynamic dashboard, where my user can actually select by year and by store, and that will control the different chart elements. So I like to maybe put them over to the left-hand side as we kind of see what it looks like on a, on a page basis. We've got our slicers, we've got our 4 graphs, and users can now dynamically start working with the data really in a powerful fashion. Now, this is where things start becoming a bit difficult, because sometimes you're not sure what you want to see. I have a canned pie chart, a canned column chart with a lot of these little, selections here, but I'm using slicers, so I'm not sure I really want to see these. So now it becomes a difficult part of applying formatting, and there's all kinds of formatting you can use. Now, the nice thing with Excel is if I highlight this chart and I go to my Design tab, over on the left-hand side, I've got my formatting tips all on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to add a chart title, I can put it above chart, and I can call this number of customers by store by period. Okay, from there, if I don't want my legend on the right-hand side, I can come in here. We can go to legend. We can move it from the right-hand side to the bottom. I also, since I'm using slicers, I don't necessarily need these buttons. I can come in here and I can right-click, and I can hide all of my field buttons on the chart. Gives me more space. And it just looks nicer, I think. If I wanted to elongate the bars, at this point now I can right click on my selection, I can format the data series, and I can certainly stretch out what I want it to look like. So there's all kinds of neat things you can do here to essentially make your pivot chart look attractive. Same thing on with pie charts. There's a lot of things we can do. I can go ahead and remove these guys just like we did. I can go into, in fact, let's go over here. Let's go ahead and take the legend out altogether. Data labels. If you notice, it's essentially sticking the number of customers wherever we want it. Best fit seems to always work for me. I'm going to use best fit. I'm also going to go back in there, and I'm going to go to label options, and I'm going to add a few things, which is a category name. So now I have the store name and the number of customers that are in there. And there's things we can do by clicking on this guy here, and we can explode it. Got to be careful here. If you use a little drag, you're going to end up with, something like that. So we'll kind of take it little by little, And we can kind of add some, separation. Of course, one of our stores really leads the pack. That's our main location. And, essentially is a much larger than all the other, but the pie explosion just gives it a greater effect. We can do the same thing, by changing our titles. We can change colors. So formatting, definitely under the design tab, lots of things we can do. Excel gives you predefined formats, but sometimes it just takes getting in there and playing around with it to get it to the point you want. So at this point now, I go back to my charts tab. I kind of have everything the way I want it. I will have refreshed my data next month, pulling in all of the new non-financial information into this table. It refreshes the pivot tables automatically so that I may now have a different top 5 this month that I had last month. And now my charts are ready to be essentially played with. I can look at store visitors by month, by year, and I select my store, and I have a dynamic chart that shows me the information for that store. Likewise, if I change this by year, some of my charts will change dynamically to show me how many folks visited that store on an annual basis for the years in question. So essentially, we went from creating non-financial accounts, getting our chart of accounts to recognize it. We would have posted entries that gives us the information for non-financial accounts. And understand, you could certainly do this with numerical information, with item inventory history, with financial history. I simply chose non-financial accounts to look at headcount. But any which way we can get information into a table like this, we can start working on, because we can create pivot tables, and from there those pivot tables will become pivot charts. And by adding slicers to our pivot charts, we give the user the ability to kind of control what they want to see. And with that, that concludes my demonstration. I believe we can open up the floor to questions, or I'll take a look at any questions that came up. I don't see any questions that have come up, but we can certainly open up the floor to questions if you guys have any. So I see a question, is this available in Sage 50? Let's see, I'm not as proficient in Sage 50, but here's what I'll say. If you can get information directly from Sage 50 into any type of table like this, in other words, if you configure Sage 50 to export the information into Excel, the key is to have the information in Excel in these exact columns. Once things are in the exact columns, then we can start creating pivot tables where you don't have to manipulate them. And then, of course, the charts are based off of the pivot tables. So while I showed you how to grab this information directly from Sage 100 to Excel, I'm not entirely sure if we have that capability with Sage 50, but if you can extract the information from Sage 50, or, I know even QuickBooks, we would have to simply, run a report in QuickBooks and export it out to Excel. If we can get it out to Excel in a consistent basis like this, then we're able to do everything else in much the same fashion. Let's see. Another question. Okay. So exporting information from Sage directly to Excel. Someone wanted to know if I can kind of just explain that one more time. So that's done via a database query, and I believe we may have another whole 20-minute demonstration online. I know I've created one many years ago that goes through this process in great detail. So we probably have another YouTube demonstration on just doing a database query from Sage 100 to Excel, but I'll kind of explain how that looks one more time. If I had a fresh spreadsheet and I go to the Data tab and I go to From Other Sources, I'm going to go to Microsoft Query. I'm going to select the Sodamass 90 DSN. This is the bridge that takes Excel to Sage 100. Okay, all of the others won't talk to Sage 100. Sodamass 90 is that bridge. I hit OK. It's going to ask me for the company I'm working with. I'm going to say ABC. I'm going to log in using my credentials. And from there, I only have the tables that I'm allowed to see. Now, at this point here, you're really going to have to know what you're looking for. If you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to be, you know, kind of just scouring down the list and not really sure what to do. An email to us may help you speed up that process if you are looking for AP information or AR information or inventory. In this case, I'm looking for GL information, so I know that the GL information is in the GL account table and the GL detail table. And I'm simply going to go through the prompts. And Excel is going to return the information and does ask me to log in one more time. And at this point now, it goes out to Sage and it grabs the information and dumps it into Excel. It's the same as if we were to run a GL detail report at this point in time, only I'm getting the whole GL detail and not just one selection. This is everything in my GL detail. So this may take, you know, 10 seconds. It may take 45 seconds, depending on the amount of data you're pulling in. But what I enjoy about this is if I'm doing some heavy analysis into the GL, I have everything at my fingertips, every journal entry, for every date, and I can start researching it at a much faster level than running reports. I hope that was a 1-minute extra demonstration on how to do a database query. Again, we also do have another seminar, I believe, in YouTube that goes through creating database queries alone. Another question, is there an offset needed to doing a non-financial posting? There is not. The nice thing about non-financial postings is it's not like a normal financial posting that requires a debit or credit account. You're simply posting that transaction just as it is. So if I were to post a non-financial entry for the amount of headcount and I posted it as 20, once I post it, it goes to my general ledger. There's no need to have an offset account. If I made a mistake and it really should have been 18, what I would do is create a second non-financial entry, and I would actually do a credit of 2 for my second entry. And then it'll behave kind of like a normal account where I'm going to have 2 postings, one for positive 20 or debit, the other for a credit of 2, leaving the balance for the month of 18. So another question, if you can't see the Sodamass DSN in Excel, then one possibility is you're connecting to Sage through a terminal server or through Citrix or through Parallels. We have to have Excel in the same location as Sage, okay? For us to have that, if I were to go in here and I were to go to data and from other sources, that Sodamass 90 DSN is only available wherever we've installed a Sage client, okay? So again, if you have Excel in your local machine, but you connect to Sage through a terminal server or Citrix, you're probably not going to see this in your local Sage, but you'd have to open up Excel in the same environment as Sage for you to see that, which means you'll only be able to, use a database query in the same environment that Sage belongs to. So again, if you have a terminal server, you may have to, chances are you probably have Excel on that terminal server with your client. And so if you open up that version of Excel, then you will see this. The only way you're going to see this is if you install a Sage client wherever Excel resides. And again, some of these, if you get stuck or you have questions after our seminar, one of our consultants would certainly be able to help you out, maybe even go through this a second time with you to kind of get something going. Another question is, can you pull information from multiple queries or from multiple companies into the same query? In that case, the answer is no. So one of the drawbacks with the database query is it only hits one table at a time. If you were trying to get multiple companies into one table, that's where probably this method of a database query stops, and maybe Sage Intelligence with its connector comes in. Because with Sage Intelligence, we can pull information from multiple companies into one Excel tab, and then from there, we can use that information to create pivot tables and pivot charts using multiple company data. So I showed you using a database query, okay? But if you wanted to do anything with multiple companies, then I would probably say your best bet is to create the report in Sage Intelligence, which is a program in your Sage menu, and then go that way. And you will be able to do that using Sage Intelligence. Wow, I think I've covered the questions that are in the question list. Again, if you guys have follow-up questions, I believe this is going to be published out there. You can review it once again. I don't expect everyone to become a database query expert. Usually we have folks that call us up and say, hey, I'm trying to grab inventory information into Excel. Where do I go? And we can kind of point you down the right road. Creating pivot charts is a little bit like maybe designing a house. You kind of have to play around with it, and it may not look good at first, but as you get better in Excel, and these design tools in Excel have just gotten a lot easier to work with, so you can make your graphs look prettier and prettier. We've got things called slicers and timelines that allow us to make the charts interactive with users. So that's just getting better and better with each version of Excel. But at least this gives you a flavor of how to pull information from Sage into Excel so that you can start playing with it. With that said, I believe that concludes our demonstration.